Welcome to Rogue Bogues Basketball Series, Episode 4. Me and the big fella. Pro, how you going, man?
Not bad. I prefer wide fella. I'm very sensitive to that. So the wide fella. Because big fella could be like 6'9". We definitely know that I'm like 5'3", 480 pounds. So I'd like, my people like to be called wide, actually.
Body positive movement, baby. Come on.
Hey, what are you going to do? That's my movement.
That's it. Man, what a week. We have a lot to get through, so no bullshit small talk. Let's rock and roll. I have some breaking news, which you'll find very interesting. I had some people reach out to me when we spoke about a couple of weeks ago about the protocols the NBA have in place for COVID and how I thought it was a little bit smoke and mirrors, the social distancing on the bench, the masks and whatever. But anyway, we've got to a point where half of Philly's team has been depleted by COVID. It's reared its ugly head within the league again. I think Tatum just got announced that he's got it. Now they're looking at close contacts of his, which I assume would be anyone he played against. But I had someone reach out to me who shall remain anonymous. I have found out that NBA teams traveling on the road, going into hotel rooms, it's strict lockdown. They've locked down floors and whatnot, and they're trying to isolate guys. They can actually have, 2 guests come to their room per road trip that are friends, quote unquote.
The fuck out of here.
How do you think that's going down?
Not very well.
Yeah.
They can invite 2 friends. They got to get tested though, right?
No. So here we go.
Get the fuck.
Yeah, so here we go. I've got the official internal memo, health and safety protocols, travel and accommodations. It's labeled .K number 2. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read the last sentence. Party may be visited in their individual hotel rooms by up to 2 guests, e.g. family members or long-time close personal friends who reside in the city where the team is playing. Now, so I got that information, so I reached out to a few people to find out exactly if that's true. It's been confirmed it is true. It has also been confirmed. My next question was yours. Are they, how are you testing those people? Do they have to be in a bubble beforehand? Nope. They just come straight in. Now, we know NBA players like to have some fun off the court. And I can guarantee you that the friends extend to certain people sending DMs to them on Instagram and whatnot, it is what it is. But that goes to my point, Pro, that I made a couple of weeks ago. I think a lot of this is smoke and mirrors. You now have the Philadelphia 76ers almost couldn't play a game because they didn't have enough players in their roster. When I read this, I was alarmed. I think it's just a spit in the face to all the protocols that they're putting out there for us to see, when you can just basically bring, who determines a friend? What's a friend? Can it be a girl off the street that you just met as you were going to your hotel room and one of those girls has COVID that you're having a coffee with in your room, then it's on for young and old.
Yeah, I mean, you know this way more than I do, but come on, the road's a joke, right? Like you're there, and now maybe with new protocols and things, you're there an extra night, but you're there literally one night. You have a pandemic
because it's usually the home and home,
yeah.
So it's usually each team will now play whoever they're playing 2 nights, so you might be there 3 or 4 nights. Yep. Go ahead.
Right. Look, it's a little bit of an inconvenience. I get it, but it's hot enough not being in a bubble and these guys going home to their families and having a chance to catch it in their hometowns. I understand that. You're in your hometown, things happen, you got kids in school, but now you're on the road. I mean, you can deal with 3 or 4 days with not having anybody in your room just because you don't know what those people are doing. See, I don't trust anybody. Like if someone says, hey, look, mask, social distancing, great. I would do it down to the T. But you know that other people are like, no, I'm just going to do whatever the fuck I want to do. And it puts everybody at risk. I mean, you put out this huge memo in the beginning, here's all our protocols. And to have something like this where you don't have to test them, if that's accurate and you don't have to test them, it just opens it up for, this is why, like now you're seeing all these people getting infected. I mean, that's why, it's got to trace back to this most likely. Obviously, we don't know where they caught it, and to have people that you don't have to test in your room, it's a powder keg that's just going to blow up in your face. And look what they're doing now. You almost had to cancel the game, for Philly today. I mean, you've got the Celtics that are infected. Mavericks just had 3 people that they had to put in the protocol. It's pretty ugly, right? It's going to get worse. and it's going to get worse.
It is, and that's what's alarming to me. I think your point on, are these people being tested? I don't think they can be, because the tests usually take a day or two anyway to come back. So if you're visiting someone in a city, I think the obvious thing is, as much and as hard as it would be for NBA players, is you just can't, like you said, it's 3 or 4 days in that city. The whole world's eating a shit sandwich right now with COVID. People losing jobs, restaurants are shutting, people's paychecks are gone. I mean, this is just one of the things that we have to kind of give up. But I called it, man. I'm calling myself Bogues. I mean, I called this 3 or 4 weeks ago because I know the MO of NBA players. I've been around that league for 15 years. Players generally, 90% of them don't like their own company and struggle to sit in a room by themselves. It's just, this isn't a knock on anyone. It's fact. And you can attest to it. I mean, guys have their routines. They like going out, going to a certain club, going to a bar, seeing a certain girl, seeing a certain cousin or family member on the road. And you just can't stop human nature.
No, I was seeing a certain mini fridge on the road, in the mini bar, and spending $98 to hard wet. But I understand. Right, you're right. Like, most NBA players are going to go out somewhere. They're going to go out with teammates. They're going to go out with their families. They're going to go out with their families and their wives or girlfriends or both. It doesn't. They're going to see someone, and to have two people that don't have to get tested, it just opens it up. I mean, you can definitely deal. I mean, look. Everybody in the NBA is getting paid pretty good money, from the staff guys to the coaches to the players. And if you just have to hold the line by saying, okay, when you're on the road, you're just going to be in your room and you're going to play games. And hey, look, that's the way it has to be. I mean, look at the bubble, how well it worked. They were ironclad on everything they had to do. You had to get tested, masks, visitors were later, and it worked. And you can't tell me that people you're going to invite, and especially if it's someone that's DMing you to meet you for the night, like, you don't know where they've been. And it just sets you up for bad things. And again, we're like 3 weeks into the season, 3.5 weeks into the season, and we've already having 3 or 4 big blowups with this thing. I would say just do the bubble, but like, this rule, definitely, it doesn't have much common sense to me. If in fact that's what's going on.
Well, it is. I mean, I've got it in front of me in writing. I'm pretty sure it's concrete. I'm not silly enough not to reach out to a few players playing in the league to get confirmation. They confirmed. One player that I spoke to was pissed about it because he's like, so I'm doing everything right. I'm quarantining. I'm trying to keep my family away from COVID. And then I have a teammate that happens to meet a girl on Instagram or a random and they have COVID, bring it to him, and then I'm sitting next to him in the locker room or on the bench, and then I get it. Like, what the hell's going on? And he's got more than a point. But I definitely confirmed that this was confirmed, that not only from someone in the front office, but also from a player. So I'll be on record to say I'm 100% certain this is true.
The only one that was DMing me on the road was my pizza delivery guy, by the way. Just so, yeah, it's just crazy. Like he said, right? You're trying to do everything right. And I'm sure there are players that are trying to do everything right. Probably players around the league that are not seeing anybody in the road. So, you know what? I don't even want to risk this. I don't want to risk this for my team. I don't want to risk this for the league. I don't want to risk this for my family. And then you have some players and staff that probably don't give a fuck. And it'll be like, you know what? I'm going to do what I do, and it is what it is. And it just puts everybody at risk. This rule, I don't know which one of your informants. Is this like the Departed movie when you have these like CIs? You have
what's funny about it, bro? What's funny about it, man, is I'm not looking for this shit. And I guess that's what we want. We want the rogue Bogues. Is I've got the balls to break this kind of stuff. I have no problem talking about it. I get blacklisted. I have no issue with it. But people are sending me this, like, hey, you might find this interesting. This is some bullshit. I heard you talking about the social distancing on the bench and all that, but check this out. And it's like, I got to run with it, obviously, and put it out there because I think it's important breaking news. The other thing is there has to be people out there in the media that know about this, and the NBA crony media, no one's broken this. It's a huge story. If you're talking about, like I said, if you weren't going so gung-ho on the appearance of socially distanced bench, they just put in the mask mandates for bench players, the water coolers that are all for an individual player. If you weren't trying to put that in our face so much, I'd be like, look, mistakes happen. But the fact that you're trying to really implement that you're doing everything you can, you're not. You're not. Like, I mean,
yeah.
The worst thing you can do is have two people from outside your travel bubble come into that bubble because common sense says one of them's got the sniffles or COVID, your whole team's going to get it within a day.
Yeah.
Private jets, charter jets, bench, locker room, training room, touching the ball. You can wear as many masks as you want. Guys take their mouth guards out when they get checked out of games. Like, you can do whatever you can to prevent it. Like you said, they're trying to do the max, but then that 2 people thing basically shits on all your other protocols.
I would definitely shut that down. I mean, look, I understand that people want to be social on the road. Maybe they want to see family, and it's not just a woman of the night thing, but it's got to be.
That, bro. Let's be serious. Highly doubt that.
Yeah, let's be serious. I'm a nice guy sometimes. But, like, I know some people are trying to do the right thing, but it's just not, you just can't trust that element if you're not testing these people. Like, it just makes no sense to me. If you're really, like, if you have buses, now I guess buses only have 12 to 15 people on them, going to and from the arena. They've got, they're spacing out the benches. They've got all this distancing, all this testing. And why are you going to open it up to, people on the road that can see you that don't have to be tested, and you just don't know where they've been? And it's just, to me, it's too much of a liability. And as you've seen, the numbers go up and spiking a little bit, and it's just 3 weeks into the season. It's a tough deal.
Yeah, it is. Anyway, we'll see where that goes. I'm sure this will get some attention and have some people talking, but we'll move on to another big bit of news from last week. Becky Hammon, first woman, quote unquote, to coach in the NBA. So yeah, that was really big news. I believe Becky is not the head assistant, who generally in NBA circles, when your head coach gets ejected, the head assistant takes over. Becky's not the head assistant, but I believe Pop does things differently there. He lets whoever scouted a particular game, if he happens to get thrown out, they take over as head coach for the night. Look, I think my opinion on this is kind of in the middle to an extent. I think over-celebrating things like this aren't that good for the women's movement as far as getting a woman in the NBA circles to coach a team. I think it's definitely a good thing to talk about, but over celebrating it, to me, it reeks a little bit of tokenism to an extent. I think it's good, but I just don't see it as something that we should be over celebrating when there's so many fantastic female athletes in both the WNBA, the WNBL here in Australia, all around the world doing fantastic things. I think that should get almost more attention than something that as simple as, okay, a coach got thrown out and it's a massive deal. I think we talk about it quickly, but I felt like it was over celebrated to an extent. What do you think? Well,
she's done so much for the women's movement. She's works into a male-dominated sport that she's one of the first, one of the trailblazers, one of the first women to work. And when she got to the league, no question, it was a big deal, and it should be celebrated, right? She won Summer League. I forgot if it was a first year or a second year in the league. She won Summer League, which is a big deal. First woman to do that, and they celebrated that. I think that's great. She got promoted to the front of the bench. I think that's the first time that happened. Again, I'm not a big, hey, celebrate every little thing, but those are things that I think were big to celebrate. My thing now is with this is like you said, Pop gets thrown out. He literally has to pick the person who's going to coach. That to me isn't a huge accomplishment because you're just doing your job like any other coach would. She's going to be a head coach in this league. It's just a matter of when. I would say in the next 3 years or before, you're going to probably see her get hired hired as a head coach somewhere. And I think, that's obviously has to be celebrated. If Pop does what Don Nelson did to Avery Johnson when he was, getting Avery to become a head coach and takes a night off and says, hey, you're going to coach this game from tip to buzzer. You could celebrate that even though it's not her head job, it's not her team, but that's a whole game she got ready for. She had a coach 4 quarters. That's something that you could probably put in that, that segment, but to celebrate just, taking over, head coach gets thrown out and you're only coaching for what have you. I think it just sort of minimizes it a little bit. I think it's something you should talk about, of course. Hey, hats off to, Becky for doing what have you, coaching the game last night, but it's over pouring out of everywhere, in the media, from coaches to players. Again, I get it. We're in a society where we celebrate everything, but I think that she was just doing her job like any other assistant would.
And that's my point exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the things that she has done, like you said, Summer League, and even just becoming a woman that's at the front of the bench is an accomplishment that we celebrate and that we tick a box with and say, hey, that's fantastic. But I just believe that if you start celebrating smaller things like that, it takes away from when potentially when Becky Hammon gets her first head coaching job and it's celebrated, you might have some people that are kind of half tuning out, like, oh, here we go again, and
Yeah.
that's what you got to be careful of. And I think, like I said, I think it diminishes actual big accomplishments. I just don't think it's that big of an accomplishment of coaching a game where a head coach gets thrown out. Winning a summer league, though, like you said, fantastic. So I hope we see her coaching an NBA team one day, and that should essentially be one of the next jobs, you'd think, right? With the way the league's celebrating women in the NBA and the whole movement around women in sport, I think the next opening, at least your top 3 candidates should be a woman.
Yeah, and I think that she's by far probably the best candidate. I mean, look, she's moved up, and you know what? I'll give San Antonio a little bit of credit. She wasn't a token hire in obviously how they do things over there, and I'll give you the reasoning. She was behind the bench. She was getting interviews for head jobs, even though she was only behind the bench. But they had a couple of people move on to become head coaches, and they promoted her. So it's not one of those things where they just wanted a woman on their staff. And then they would have these hires, like their assistants would move on and they would hire other people over her, which would say, wait a minute, like she's waited like any other assistant. Why isn't she moving up? And they promoted her to in front of the bench. So I'll give them a lot of credit. A lot, you know how it is, Bogues. A lot of people in this league, they just talk like they do it on social media and they want everyone just to think they're included in this and they're all for it. But when it comes time to, either hire people or do things that they don't do it, but they just want that perception like they're all on board on things. I give San Antonio some credit, for promoting her, developing her and, helping her become, a good candidate for a head coaching job. And she will be. But you're right. I just think that, to praise that, and again, that's Pop's choice. It's literally like, who's going to win the lottery today? And I could pick, I'm getting thrown out. I'm picking the coach. So I'm going to pick you to coach. It's not, like I said, it's not like she coached it from tip to buzzer. She filled in for a boss who's telling her to coach. So, I know we're in like I said, I know in the society we celebrate everything. There's not 3 minutes that goes by. There's not a new NBA record found by some stats nerd that goes on in the league. But it diminishes a little bit, And look, I'm not going to tell anybody how to feel or anything, but like to me, it diminishes it just a little bit when you're celebrating that. The other things, no question. When she becomes a head coach, no question. And that's just sort of how I feel on that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think San Antonio is probably the best spot. I think, like you said, with the assistants, they're notorious for developing assistants that get head coaching jobs all around the league. I'd love to know the number of how many San Antonio Spurs kind of alumni are head coaching teams in the NBA. It'd be a pretty decent number, but I think she's in a good spot to move on. Anyway, we'll move on from that. Kyrie Irving. Hello again.
Shocker.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's reported that didn't let Steve Nash know, completely kind of went AWOL, disappeared, didn't come to the game and didn't let anyone know. Basically, someone reached out to him and there were rumors that he said he just didn't feel like playing. That's been kind of drawn back. Now people are saying that was a fake quote put out, but it was printed and quoted by a bunch of media outlets. But how do you see that all going? I mean, I see this as a train wreck for their locker room. I've heard culturally it's not going too well in that locker room. I think KD's been actually real positive from what I've heard inside there, trying to keep everyone together amidst all this, but interesting times, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, he's not going to be regardless of what, it's not the question of missing the game. Missing the game, look, how many NBA players miss games for no reason, non-injury reasons. That's fine. You come in, you say, I'm not going to play. I don't feel like it for whatever reason. Obviously, the DC thing, came on the same day or in the same time. So I understand it. But when you don't tell your coach, it's just unprofessional. And, players all the time, you hear it all the time. Basketball is a business. Basketball is a business. Half the time, those players have no idea what that means. They say it because everybody else says it. And they only say it when they're getting fucked on their contract in their negotiation, or they're going to fuck the team and go somewhere else. And they just say it's a business. Well, that has very little to do with it being a business. Being a business is you're in partnership with your team and your teammates and your organization. And you have to be professional. And that's the part where it is a business. You have to tell your coach, because you put Steve Nash in a hard spot. 99% of the time in the NBA, it doesn't matter if it's a player's fault. The coach is going to take the bullets from the media. They're gonna jump in front of things and protect the player. They just have to. That's just protocol in the NBA. But when you make him look stupid and said, well, I haven't heard from him, so I don't know.
Yeah.
And the media is just going to, like, now it's just a media frenzy about it. You already had, look, I like Kyrie Irving. He's a good player. He's not, I've spent some time with him, not a bad kid, but you got to call it the way you see it. This is unprofessional. This is not how professionals act. And when young players that are very impressionable in your locker room, you're saying, well, is this how I do it? You know, when I start getting to be a veteran, is this how I'm going to handle it? You have to communicate with your organization. You got to protect them like they protect you, and you got to move on. I just think this is, like, Steve Nash is one of the best human beings of all time, I've heard, you know, from the people who know him. And just to do this to him, it's just not a good impression. It's just not professional.
Yeah, and Brooklyn are slated to be one of the favorites to at least end up in the NBA Finals, if not the conference finals. So, I mean, like you said, who takes the bullet if they don't? It'll be Steve Nash, if not the GM. So there's other ramifications of things like that, especially from a guy, you know, you're making $30-40 million a year. The least you can do is flick your coach a text message these days, maybe Instagram, DM him, do whatever you got to do, but at least get some sort of message to your head coach saying, I'm not in the mental space to play. But from what I heard also, that he wasn't reachable the next day and almost the day after. It was they didn't know where he was. They didn't even know if he was in the city of where they were playing. So yeah, I think it sets a bad precedent. I mean, like we've discussed it before with the Yogi Farrell reference. I mean, if someone on the Brooklyn Nets 11th, 12th, 13th rostered guy did that, what do you think would happen?
You think the equipment guy, if he doesn't call anybody and he just doesn't show up, you think he's going to be all right? Yeah. I mean, come on, give me a fucking break. I'm all about professionalism. I don't care if you average 3 points a game or 43 points a game. It just, everybody's in that locker room together. Everybody's together. And to do that and to put your coach and your team out there, I don't care if you won that game or lost that game. It's not professional. It's not the way it should be done.
Yeah, and then you've got, I mean, it's just hard. What do Brooklyn do? They still haven't really announced anything. I don't think they do anything because of the, you know, everything going on in the world. I think they're just going to try to block it out and move on. The NBA has announced they won't fine the Nets because potentially the game was a nationally televised game. So you've got that new NBA rule where if you rest guys, you can fine the team. But the NBA's came out and said that, you know, he missed it for his personal reasons. So I'll be interested to see what Brooklyn does, because I think it also, you know, back to Steve Nash, I mean, it can kind of hurt his credibility a little bit in that locker room if they do absolutely nothing too. You know, I know it's Kyrie, and I know Kyrie can go AWOL completely, and you might not want to push that button yet and make it get even worse. But, you know, if you're a younger guy now and can you now disrespect Steve? You know, I think that's a question that he'll probably have to fix within that own group. But you hope that things turn around for Brooklyn. Moving on, there was an article, I think you sent it to me, Trae Young, John Collins article, written in The Athletic by Chris Kirschner. Basic story is Trae Young was called out in a meeting by John Collins, said, look, you're shooting early in the shot clock. I feel like I can be more involved. I mean, part of that from John Collins might be he feels like he needs more touches individual. It could be more team orientated where, you know, the ball's moving more, we win more, whatever it is, who knows the real reasons. But caught him out in a film session, reported that Trae doesn't respond in meeting, then leaves the meeting and pouts to teammates about what John Collins said. Instead of addressing it face to face, then goes and does the locker room lawyer type shit, which can absolutely derail a team, as we both know. Clint Capella weighs in, which I found interesting. He weighs in and says, look, guys, I've seen this with James Harden and Dwight Howard. This exact same thing happened. They were both pouting about touches, and then one got traded. We just never really gelled because of that. Don't do that. I guess it then festered onto a game or two or three. And you said you watched a few of those games where it seemed like Trae Young was going with the passive aggressive. I'm not going to shoot. I'm just going to not try to make plays. I'm just going to pass it to other guys who obviously aren't as talented as him and can't create a shot as well as he can, and see if you guys can do it without me. And that was blatant, definitely against Detroit where they got blown out. And I think you watched a few of those games as well, right?
Yeah, so that was the Charlotte game. It wasn't Detroit. Detroit was earlier in the year, but the Charlotte game is the first Charlotte game. They're playing Charlotte tonight as well. But, I mean, frustration is obviously normal with teams that aren't winning. You know, they made a lot of free agent pickups in the summertime. They upgraded their roster, and they came out to be like 4-1 in the start of the season. When I was talking to a couple of friends of mine around the league, they were talking about Atlanta, and I'm like, yeah, but the NBA is big. It doesn't matter if you start out good. you're eventually going to get punched in the face. And what are you going to do when you get punched in the face? What's Trae Young going to do? What's John Collins going to do when they get punched in the face and they start losing? Because it goes with every team. And it just seems like they're frustrated. Those guys are not, they're sort of losing it a little bit in the last few games. And, John Collins, I think, his number's a little bit down. He passed up $90 million in his contract. He wants a max deal, so he probably wants more touches, and he wants to be a more of a focal point. But this all goes down to a couple of things. The team-wise, they got to do a lot better defensively. That's a big problem with them. They don't have anybody that could really guard anybody. Trae Young, if he wants to be the leader of the team, needs to, take more of a focal point on defense. He can't be passive aggressive if somebody calls him out. That's part of being an NBA player. You're going to get called out. And, if it's your own teammate, you might not like the way he did it, but that's just the way it is. You have Rajon Rondo in that locker room where, if I was Trae Young, because Trae Young right now and John Collins right now are just players that put up numbers on bad teams. They haven't found a way to win yet, and they have to find a way to win, and they have to understand what winning is. And Trae Young, you're not going to win if you're passive aggressive and you want to disengage in games because you felt as though you got called out and you don't agree. And that team, as it is, they expect, obviously their GM came from Golden State. They expect Trae Young to be Steph Curry. He's not Steph Curry. Steph Curry is one of the best shooters of all time. He's shot under 40% from three, maybe once, if not twice in his whole career, where Trae Young's like a 36% three-point shooter. He puts up numbers, but they don't win. So how does that translate? And I think that they need to get together. They need to stop the bullshit, get together and say, look, we have to win. We have to do better. We have to play better. And Capella's got to be better too, because he's the anchor of that defense. And yeah, he's putting up numbers, but when I watch them play, he's not active on defense. He's not really protecting the rim. He's late on rotations. The weak side doesn't give a fuck. Like, they really need to center in defensively and then get good shots, because they're just not good enough to show up. They don't have that talent. Gallo's been out for a while. Rondo's got that bad knee. He's out for a couple more games. So they have to right the ship, and you just can't decide to quit. You got a coach who's on his last year of his deal who potentially could lose his job, and you're just going to quit on, you quit on the team because you just get called out. That's not winning to me in this league. And it's hard to be a winner in this league. He averaged 29 a game last year. I get it. But that's, again, they don't win. They're one of the worst teams in the league. So you have to figure out, be on the same page, get through things together. And again, when you get punched in the face like this and things aren't going your way, you figure out together. You watch more film. You talk to the coaches. And you get on the same page. You don't just pout and say, "Oh, I'm not going to do it tonight because I got called out." It's just not the way it gets done.
And I've seen there's been good players that have done what Trae has done for maybe a half or a game. I mean, Kobe did it. I think Kobe did it. There was a game back in the day, I believe, that he refused to take a shot, wasn't there? Was it against the Suns, maybe?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, so I mean, he's the best player in the world essentially at that point. So even he's had bad halves or quarters, but you can't let that fester into all of a sudden 2 games, 3 games, 5 games, a month, and then all of a sudden you're 9-18, and like you said, the season's over. But one comparison I'd have, look, Steph Curry. A lot of people compare Trae to Steph, similar kind of starts in the league, high scorers. When Steph really turned the corner, I mean, once he blocked out that whole, I need to get my numbers to solidify where I was taken in the draft and that I'm the face of this franchise. Once he realized that, hey, if some of these role players that are helping me, if I can get them going early, if I can get them, Andre Iguodala hits a 3, Bogut gets the dunk, David Lee gets a finger roll, and I get everyone involved without being overly trying to get them involved, because there's a difference, but still being aggressive. Steph knew that he'd have a 3 or 4 minute block that once everyone else has hit a shot and flattened out that defense and made it a bit more honest, he'd have a 3-minute block where he'd score 16 points. Once Steph figured that out, it was over for the league, because he knew that he could switch off for a couple of possessions. He could play off the ball maybe and not pout about, hey, I didn't get a touch for 3 possessions. It didn't matter, because he knew eventually that defense would flatten out and become honest, and bang. And you look up and he's got 6 points, and then 5 minutes later he's got 21. And that happens so many games. And I try to tell so many young guys that, like, you don't need the ball. You don't need to do 15 dribbles. You don't need to have the touch every possession. When you're an unbelievable shooter and scorer, you'll do it in bunches and quick. And Clay and Steph are notorious for it. Like Clay probably a little bit different because he'll shoot it whenever he touches it. But
Sure.
But Steph figured that out. And then on the defensive end, Steph figured, all right, I'm saying I'm a bad defender. He got to a point where he was an average, if not above average defender at times, it wasn't from strength or quickness. It was strictly on knowing the scouting report, doing his extra work before games, and he became a 2-time MVP. And that's the correlation I'd have for Trae is like, if you can get John Collins 2 dunks, if you can get Gallo 2 open threes, eventually there's going to be a lull in that quarter or half where they kind of don't forget about you, but it's kind of the shackles are off a little bit and you go bam, 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 bam. And then for us with the Warriors, it was a 5-point lead, went to 18 and the game was almost over.
No, it's the same conversation I had with Kobe when I started working for him. It was like, look, get Trevor Ariza going, get Paul Gasol going, get Derek Fisher going, get Lamar Odom going. And if you can get those guys going, you don't have to work as hard and put so much on your shoulders. And I'm not saying Trae's like he's a selfish player at all. He probably puts it a lot on himself. And you could tell. I had a couple of friends that scouted him when he was in college. And they told me that he's very to himself, doesn't really hang out with teammates, doesn't really eat with teammates. He doesn't, he sort of takes care of what he needs to take care of. He puts his work in. And as a point guard, you can't really do that, in my opinion. You have to lead. You watch Rondo play, and again, all players are different. I don't expect him to be like Rondo, but like you watch him, he's directing, he gets everybody in a huddle. He tells everybody where they need to be. And then also, if he's trying to be like Steph Curry, here's where I think a big difference in both their games. Steph was so good off the ball. He got to be like, all right, I'll give it up early in the possession and sprint to the other end of the floor, coming off a pin down, off to, cut to the basket or coming off a pin down for a shot. So he was always cutting, always moving. It seems like Trae, when he gives the ball up, Bogues, he just sort of stands there.
Stops.
Yeah, and you just can't stop. Not in today's game, the way that games, the way the game's played. You got to continuously be cutting, screening for people, cutting to the basket, spacing the floor, get the ball back. You can't just sort of stand still. It just doesn't work. They'll figure it out, but again, it's not about just putting up your points, because anybody could put up points on bad teams. You got to figure out how to win. And like you said, you got to get those guys involved early. Bogdanovich, I think, just got banged up tonight too. So they're losing guys. It's going to be tough. But again, when you get punched in the face in this league, you got to step up, and this is how you react. Anybody can go 3-1. Anybody can go 3-1, 4-1, 5-1 early in the season, but there's going to be adversity, and how you going to get impacted. Look, in college, you had 7 bums you had to play before you got to conference, right? Azusa State, Pacific Union. You don't have bums on your schedule in the NBA. Everybody's got NBA players. If you don't show up, you can get blown out. It doesn't matter if you play in the 30th best team in the league. So you can't take days off, especially them. So you have to get it together every night and figure it out. And like I said, when you face adversity, anybody could, pump their chest out when they're 5-0, 4-1. But there's going to come adversity, and this is how winners become winners. How they deal with the adversity.
Yeah, I agree. And look, Atlanta's at that point where it's nut cutting time within now or over the next year. They've got a pretty good roster on paper, and unfortunately, we're probably going to see a head coach get fired if they don't figure this thing out. So let's watch that one closely. They're one of the more exciting young teams in the league, but let's hope they can turn it around. Let's move on to a conversation we had during the week. The state of the game, the state of the NBA. I mean, it's pretty obvious with where the game's headed or where it's at. It's bomb up as much threes as you can. I mean, there's not a whole lot of defense that's heavily emphasized. I mean, to see some scores in the 130s, 140s to me is nonsensical. On the flip side, the reffing's changed. You can't touch anyone. Physicality's kind of gone out of the game. There's a lot of analytics guys that obviously favor let's hoist up as much threes as we can because that's what the analytics say. How do you see all that?
Yeah, so over the summer, I read this book called Sprawl Ball, and it's about analytics, and it explains it really well about what sort of the idea behind analytics. And what they want to do, analytics people, is squeeze every point out of as many points out of a possession as possible. They feel as though NBA teams are going to shoot 36% from the three, throughout the course of a season. So every time you take a three, it's going to be worth 1.2 points every time you shoot the three, because it's going to even out by the end of the year, end of the week, end of the month. And if you take contested 2-point shots and mid-range shots, they might be worth 0.6, 0.7, 0.8. So The analytics people explain it. Look, it's like playing blackjack and you have like a 10% advantage over your opponent, Johnny, who's from Oklahoma City, who just wants to burn $300 on a night on the town. If you have a 10% advantage over 30, 40, 50 hands of blackjack, you're going to end up grinding out wins versus somebody who doesn't have any type of advantage. So analytics people just want to see threes and layups. Daryl Morey is big on it, obviously, with the threes and the layups, and they don't like the mid-range, in Houston and now in Philly, he's trying to do the same thing. So what happens, Bogues, it's probably been around for about 9 or 10 years, the analytics movement in the NBA. And what it does, it takes a lot of originality out of the NBA game, because a lot of the teams, they play the same. They want to jack up threes and they want to shoot layups. And look, when you have a roster that's built for that, you look pretty good. When you're making threes, especially when you're down early, you take more threes. It's going to get you back in the league, get you back in the game. But when you're a bad team, which you have a few in the NBA now, it just, when you're jacking up contested threes and these step backs, and you're taking shitty shots early in the shot clock, you're gonna get yourself in trouble where you're losing 30, 40, 45, 50 points. Because it's a talent league. And I just think that what analytics should tell you is what sort of shot, what type of shots you should take, but you should come sort of in the middle where, okay, we got to take more threes, but we got to hunt good threes, not just take threes because analytics says 1.2 points for every shot. And it's a big difference to me. I think that you should be able to take good shots, try to screen well, get uncontested looks from 3 and 2, but obviously know where the trouble spots are analytically, where you're more and less efficient from. And I just think that the NBA right now, Bogues, it's averaging 70 threes a game. Every team's averaging about 35 threes per game right now. So 70 threes are taken every game. It's an ugly game when it's not played well. What are your thoughts on it?
I agree. I mean, I'm getting old, and I'm obviously a guy that played the 5 spot in the NBA, so I'm probably slided more towards against a lot of threes, but I think there's a need for analytics. I have no doubt. I think it's a very important part. I think it's gone too far over to that side. I feel like some of the beauty out of basketball is gone, and I think that probably is what you were trying to say, is there's no real surprises anymore. There's no real, hey, that was a great play. It's generally 90% pick and roll with the floor spread and someone getting half a look at a three and hoisting it up. And I think the beauty of the NBA in the 90s and the 2000s was the different styles playing against each other. Like you'd have, even when I was towards the end of my career with Golden State, it was the Golden State Warriors versus Memphis in the playoffs was like a matchup of complete opposites, right? Because you had Memphis that started 2 slow big guys in Zebo and Gasol, and you had us who started an active 4-man and just a solid big. So 2 completely contrasting styles, and it was interesting, like which one's going to win, whereas now it's basically the only interest is who makes more threes. But one thing I'll also say, what's the most important shot to have in the NBA playoffs and the finals though?
Mid-range game.
Exactly.
A mid-range jump shot.
Yeah. So in the regular season, you can definitely, the referees call it a lot more tighter. You can't touch anyone. So you can get that, you can get to the rim, you can get to the free throw line, you can get your open threes. Guys just had a night on the town. They're a little bit more tired. There's a lot more traveling. You get to the NBA, at least the conference finals and the finals, the refs swallow their whistles. It becomes much more of a man's game. And the shot you're giving up is the mid-range as a defense. And you're ever rarely going to go down the middle of the lane and get a dunk. You're ever rarely going to get a feet set wide open 3. So the shot that you got to start making, Kawhi Leonard in the NBA Finals against us, killed us that year when we played Toronto. He was hitting the mid-range, and that was the shot we were giving up. So it's like, it kind of, I mean, if you want to win a championship, you're ever rarely going to do it, in my opinion, with the D'Antoni style solely. You got to have a few different, strings on your bow, essentially. You can't just go all into that, but it's just an interesting observation because the mid-range pull-up's the most vital shot in a final series, in my opinion.
Yeah, the 3-point shot, look, it's not bad. It's not where, look, like back in 1980, Bogues, they took 6 threes a game total in NBA games. If Daryl Morey was a GM back in 1980, he'd be like that old guy on the Shawshank Redemption that fucking said Red was here and fucking, and sort of, ended his life. You ever see that Shawshank?
Yep.
Yeah, he'd be like that guy. He wouldn't know what to do with himself. So, like, I understand it. The 3-point shot's valuable, but I think hunting good threes, and it just, you have a lot of these teams that don't have the shooting to back that up, and they hoist up these bad shots, and it's awful. You know how many times I have to watch two bad teams play? The TV network should save themselves some money and just play a video of those three poor bastards playing the fucking violin on the Titanic and see the water just go up. I'd rather watch that for fucking 48 minutes than watch a bad game of guys just hoisting shots up. Look, how you win in this league? First of all, competition. You got to be competitive. Good shot selection, threes and twos. And you got to give a fuck on the defensive end. And you watch teams play for the most part, unless it's a big game or a playoff game, or it's a difference between winning or losing. Most of these possessions, teams don't care about it defensively. And then offensively, it's your turn. All right, it's my turn to score. It's your turn to score. And these games are fucking brutal. Not all of them. Don't get me wrong. There are some good matchups. But when you have bad teams that, just think, because, obviously the analytics thing is being pushed where you got to take threes and layups, where you have just these bad shots and bad shot selections in situational basketball where you're making the wrong read. I remember when I was in Dallas and I was talking to somebody, we're just talking about Luka Doncic, and I said, okay, so Luka's coming off a screen. He's coming up a step up, and the guy guarding the screener is in the paint, protecting the paint. And Luka comes off the pick, and he buries his guy on the pick. So now he's coming off a screen where he's got all this pocket of space from like 13 to 18 feet wide open. What do you want him to do? And he goes, well, dribble back out and shoot a three, or pass out and make a three. So I said, that's where you lose me, and that's where you lose a player that's been playing like with feel his whole career. Where now you come, look, I understand, you don't want to take contested shots. I get it. So what analytics taught me is, okay, cut down your contested shots, especially from 2 or 3. Post-ups, I wouldn't just throw it down in the post and have a guy go to work for like 14 shots from the post a game. I'd probably put him in pick and roll, let that 1-5 switch happen and then roll him to the post and post up. I'd give him some, post-ups on the run, but mostly post-ups on switching. I'd get him on rolls, get him on, rim runs, but I would probably change the way I play a little bit. But you have to take good shots, and you have to have good shot selection, and you have to try to fight for great shots. And that could happen in 2-point shooting by screening well with pin downs or screen to roll. That could happen with threes with making that extra pass, sucking the defense in, and hitting a 3-point shooter. But now you have dribble up threes. You've got, if James Harden's doing it, Steph Curry's doing it, it's a little bit different. And that's my thing. It just takes the beauty out of the game where, ball movement, throw it in the post if they could score, if there's a good matchup. Now it's just pick and roll until you get the matchup that you want and the mismatch. And then you got to see somebody dribbling around for fucking half an hour getting a shot off. It's just tough.
Yeah, I guess that's why the old saying on a regular NBA season, going back to you saying guys not playing hard, was true basketball fans would say, tune in after the All-Star break, and
yeah.
That was known in our league, like with basketball purists, they wouldn't even watch the first 3 or 4 months because they're like, there's not a lot of effort. Guys are saving their bodies. Tune in after All-Star when playoff spots are becoming a bit more solidified and the games actually count. And there might be an argument to that.
Yeah, I agree.
Moving on from that, we get on to role players. You sent me an interesting quote, which I'll get you to read in a second, but I guess the discussion is around, can players be role players these days? Is someone that's the 7th, 8th, 9th man, hey, your job is to come in, get 5 rebounds, set 5 good screens, block a shot and get a few dunks, and that's it. We don't need you doing between the legs dribbles and trying to show us your bag. Like, we know you can do that, but we don't need you to do that. It seems like that art is kind of dying these days because every player has an agent in their ear or a cousin or an uncle or a friend that you're getting screwed, man. You should get more minutes. You need more touches, all that kind of stuff. And you're starting to see role players just gone. Whereas I guess when I came into the league, they were huge integral parts of the NBA. And I guess for people out there listening, what I equate that to is there's a reason why you never see NBA, the person that leads the G League in scoring, the minor league, ever rarely gets an NBA call-up. And why? Because the NBA teams already have good scorers. So if you really study it and you look, you'll see a lot of guys that get called up, especially late in the season for playoff runs. They fill a role really well. So they can get you 10 boards on any given night. They can take 2 charges. They can block shots. They can pick up full court and turn the opposing team's point guard for 3 or 4 minutes while Steph Curry's on the bench. And I think that art of the role player has gone. What do you think?
I totally agree. I mean, if you do the math in the NBA, Bogues, in my opinion, right, there's about 7 elite players in the NBA. There's probably after that another 15 really high level players in the league. After that, there's about maybe 50 really good high-end players that can be maybe your second option, most likely your third option of an NBA team. So basically out of the 450 players, there's 100 that's really, really important. The other 350, it's like rearranging the deck chairs at a Titanic. It doesn't matter. You could fill in spots, right? And not everybody could have the ball in their hands. And I think the biggest problem, and I faced it with, directing player development in Dallas, where like everybody you draft, it doesn't matter in the first round, second round, in their college team, they were the LeBron James of their college team. Every play was called to them. Everything was run through them. They were the man. And then you get to the NBA and say so say you go to Dallas, right? Right now, off the top of the bat is Luka and Porzingis. Right. And then you have like Tim Hardaway Jr. You've got a couple of other players that are really good. So anybody they draft is going to be the fifth option at best when they get on the floor. So they're not going to be getting into their bag or any other of that bullshit. They're going to have to play a role. And the big thing when we got players, and you remember DK, Don Cockstein, he had a saying with players. He goes, look, you got to be at a barbecue. And when your coach asks you, bring the ice, that he didn't ask you to bring fucking soda. He didn't ask you to bring hot dogs. He asked you to bring the ice. And you have to do one really good thing well. And then when he could trust you to do that, then you can move up a little bit and do a little bit more. But to get on the floor, you're going to have to do this thing really, really well. The quote that I read that I sent you, I was looking up old quotes from players, and it was from this backup of the 86 Celtic team. He's probably the second or third center. His name was Greg Kite. He was going to this big man's camp called the Pete Newell Big Man Camp that was a real famous camp in the 80s and 90s. And they were going to work on footwork. There's like 50 players that went to the camp. And what he said in the article is like, look, I know I'm not a really great player. I'm not an all-star. I need to get better at a couple of things. I need to be better to back up Robert Parrish, who was the starting center, and help my team win. And today, if you read role players' comments, either what they tweet out or what they talk to media about, it's, you guys are hating on my game. I'm top 5 at my position. You guys just don't know. And the problem is most players that come in with that attitude, they burn out easily. They burn out very quickly because they don't know how the game's played. They don't know how the business is done as far as getting to be a role player and then maybe developing a little bit better than a role player. There's a difference between being confident and being delusional. We had a guy, and this is another argument, which is on the other side of it. So in Dallas, we had Seth Curry, and Seth was one of the best shooters I've ever seen. And he put his work in. And, he came in from the D League and, he was sort of not a journeyman, but he was a role player in the NBA. And he came and he knew he wasn't a role player. He was very confident in his game, but he wasn't cocky about it where he was like arguing or complaining. And he's developed every year to get better, where now he's averaging 17 a game early in the season for Philly, and he's doing better. And yeah, he's not a franchise player, but he's developed into probably one of the best shooters in the game. And he's probably like a third, fourth option on an NBA team, where that's the difference. He was confident in his game. But when you're delusional and you're really like the 9th, 10th, 12th guy on an NBA team, and you're talking like you're like should be starting this thing, the other thing, you're going to burn out. You're going to burn out. And I think that, because of agents, because of people in your ear, because of your trainer. Trainers work usually, and there's some good ones, don't get me wrong, they're not all bad, but 90% of trainers work on 85% of the things that you'll do 1% of the time. And it fucks players up. They're not working on the spot-up shot. They're not working on cutting. They're not working on the dribble pull-up. They're not working on things like that. They're working on the fucking 18 dribble step back, Euro step move, and finish, where they'll never do. You watch video of like every one of LeBron James's possessions or any other all-star. I would say they ISO and go into a hard move 5% of the time, tops. Most of the game is what? Spot up shots, straight line drives, dribble pull-ups, cuts to the basket, transition baskets. And role players don't want to work on that shit. They think you're disrespecting them. Not all of them, but most of them. And that's what I think fucks up players more than anything.
Yeah, and on the flip side of all that with role players, do you remember a guy named Reggie Evans? Of course you would. Players like him get a lot of shit from, regular NBA fans. Oh, I'm better than him. I can shoot better than him, blah, blah, blah. But you knew when that dude came in, he'd set a motherfucker of a screen. He'd get you 6 or 7 offensive rebounds per 10, 15 minutes that he was in. He'd get you 6 extra possessions, and he'd be a solid defender and would know the scouting report. Couldn't really score to save his life. Couldn't ISO you. Couldn't dribble. He'd literally bounce the ball off his foot. But he ended up making $20, $30, $40 million just on playing a role as the best of his ability and doing whatever the coach asked. And there's a beauty of doing that as well. You can make a lot of money doing it, but on the flip side, like you said, there's a lot of guys that are like, no, I want to cross a guy over. It's like, we don't need you to do that. We have James Harden already. We need you to just be solid in your position, shoot the open shot or get the extra effort rebound, and we're good to go.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, again, social media is a big part of it. Everybody wants to be James Harden. Everybody wants to be Steph Curry. Unfortunately, nobody wants to be Evans. Nobody wants to do the dirty work. Everybody wants to be that great player. They don't want to be the Steve Kerr. They want to be, they want to be the person with the ball in their hands and scoring 38, shooting a step back and all that stuff.
Shit, ask them that question when they're playing in fucking second division in Estonia.
Yeah, no shit.
Hey, you want to come and just set 5 screens and get 5 rebounds for $5 million a year? I'm sure it'd be a different answer.
Yeah, I what's it called? There was a couple of players that we had in Dallas that were going to do that in summer league. And I said, you know what? I'll get you fucking, on your way out, we'll give you your per diem and I'll give you some fucking Rosetta Stone because you're going to be needing that shit when you're playing in Estonia next year. Because that's the truth. It's just like, look, the game, you just can't have everybody with the ball in their hands at all times. There's got to be players that do the hard stuff. And you can get paid a lot of money. You can get scholarship. You can make a lot in college. You get a lot of fucking money in the NBA and overseas by doing one thing really well. And unfortunately, these guys don't want to do that a lot of times.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a shame, but it is what it is. They'll regret it later on in their career. If only I could just shut up and play a role, I'd have an extra 15, 20 sitting in the bank account. But moving on quickly, I'll touch on NBL. We've got a bit of an issue here. Borders are still closing. We just had Brisbane locked down for the weekend. The NBL is playing musical chairs essentially with where they're going to start the season, and now they've changed the schedule again. To me, it comes down to they've organised a hub to start 4 weeks into the season, it wasn't a hub done for safety reasons, which is what irks me a little bit. It was a hub done for fiscal reasons. They got some money from the state government of Victoria and they're having a hub. I mean, my opinion is they should have started in a hub and then see how it goes, similar to what the NBA did last season. And then if things open up and get back to normal, then we can kind of shorten the hub. But just a quick one for you to keep your eyes across that hopefully the season starts next weekend. So there's not really much to talk about, but let's hope the NBL can get rolling in these crazy times. So nothing really other than that to say because no games have been played. So we'll move on to the Q&A. So we've been trolled already, Pro.
Okay.
Sure, you'll be glad to hear it.
Sure.
I'll read this out because I wasn't aware of the reference, but
sure.
I'll read this whole email out because I think it's pretty funny. Hello, Andrew. I really enjoy your podcast. As a lifelong Warrior fan, I was really bummed when they traded Monta for you. Of course, I thought it was a complete joke when the Warriors said they were going to compete for a championship. Monte was an exciting player. You were not an exciting player.
Awesome.
Maybe Jerry West has a better eye for winning basketball than I do. Who knows? That fat guy, Mike, is really doing good on the podcast. I looked him up, and you know who he looks like? King Kong Bundy. Maybe you guys can do the pro wrestling circuit together. My question for you, 2015 championship season, David Lee kind of came out of nowhere to spark the team on offense. Defensively, he couldn't do anything with the Cavs front line, but it seemed like he created a blueprint that helped Draymond figure out how to contribute on offense. Can you talk about that series and Lee's contribution? Bonus question, which is King Kong Bundy and which is that fat guy Mike? And he has attached a photo of each. I forwarded you the email.
Yeah, first of all, the guy's from fucking Sacramento, okay? If anyone hasn't been at Sacramento and took a walk down Sacramento, you would think you're on a casting call for fucking The Walking Dead because there's about 8 million zombies in the middle of downtown. That's first of all. Second of all, that's disrespectful to fucking King Kong Bundy. Okay. That guy actually had a waistline. With me, when I ask for when I ask for a belt when I go to the store, they say, just wear the equator around your fucking waist and shut the fuck up. So, King, that's disrespectful to King Kong Bundy. Rest in peace, by the way. He just passed away.
Oh, wow. Did he? That's not good.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, pal. Yeah. That's a little bad fucking comment from me. I appreciate it.
Just sat on Sacramento.
Yeah.
To answer his question, I guess, David Lee was huge for us in the 2015 championship series. We went small. I played a lot less minutes in that final series. And David Lee, funnily enough, didn't play much during the regular season and end of the regular season and the playoffs. But a testament to being professional and staying ready. I think he got in for one game. It might have had 15 points in quick succession in about 6 or 7 minutes. So I guess, the only comment I'd have about that, especially for younger kids that aren't playing a lot, is just continue to put your work in and do the right thing. And you never know when a coach is going to put you in the game. In this case, it was an NBA final series that helped us win a championship ring. So thanks for your question. I'm sure Pro thanks you as well.
Yeah, thanks, pal. I appreciate it.
Another one comes from, where is this one from? Greg Rutsinski out of, doesn't say where he's from, so from somewhere, I assume. I'm a big fan of the podcast, enjoyed your career, can draw plenty of similarities, being the migrant kid playing basketball in Australia. I have a couple of questions I'd appreciate for your podcast. You mentioned in your latest podcast that you were somewhat disgruntled with Basketball Australia as a junior. Can you please elaborate on this and what it was specifically, what made you feel this way? Good question. Look, I think it was just you just felt like you weren't part of the establishment. I was never one of the kids that was in the coach's fondest group as far as parents making cookies and cupcakes and them hanging out on the weekend having barbecue. I was never in that group of cool kids and cool parents. My parents kind of kept to themselves. So I felt like I was always kind of an outsider, and the WOG thing, or being the Eastern European background, played a little bit of a part. I probably thought it did more than it really did, but it definitely was a bit of an issue. Look, basketball clubs, especially where I played, were very Anglo at the time, very, very Australian, at least the junior sporting landscape. So it was a bit of an issue, and I kind of had a chip on my shoulder with BA because of that. And because I never made a state team or a high elite team till later on in my career, I thought I was hard done by early. But stupidly enough, looking back, if I would have made those teams at a young age, I don't think I would have been the player I am today. So I think it all worked out in the long run. And the second question, what do you see were the key determining factors regarding your AIS peers taking the next step as professionals? Did some choose the right path, or was it a case of not being able to cut it? Well, I think just being a professional is not easy in any form of life, any profession. I think it takes a lot of time, effort, and it takes a lot of time and effort when you're not being paid to do something to continue to do it to better yourself. So the kids that went to the AIS and adapted well with the schedule and how brutal it was, and just adapted on the fly and understood that a lot of the stuff that you're doing off the court, the ice baths, the stretching, the proprioception, the weights, they were all extensions of being a professional. So some kids didn't get that. They were just more like, hey, I just want to play basketball. And they're the ones that more times than not fizzled out. And I'm sure you'd see that a lot, Pro.
Yeah, I agree. And, I listened to your pod today about talking about the AIS and, how people just sometimes couldn't make it because they couldn't do the daily things. Look, getting better is boring. It's not as exciting as you see it on Instagram where you're listening to rap music, fucking taking, step back jumpers all day. If you really want to be professional at something, especially at the international level, they're really serious about it and working on all aspects of the game. And it's boring doing the same thing over and over and over again, but that's how you get good at anything. And I think that a majority of people just can't handle that. Sometimes it's going to be you're not good enough to make it, but a lot of times is you might be good enough to make it, but you just can't handle the daily routine that you need to be great. Also, side story, Bogues, I applied for a job at the AIS back in 1997,
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, you and I could have been... I saw some advertisement online and I called the guy, and, the guy, like, we talked a couple of times, it didn't work out. He actually said, pal, you don't need AIS. You need fucking Overeaters Anonymous. So, here's the number to it. And he gave me a few numbers to it. But no, I always respected the AIS.
You obviously didn't go.
Obviously, I didn't go. And you know what? I didn't go to show that motherfucker up.
That's
no,
why,
but
right?
seriously, though, I respect the AIS. So like for the academy version, as far as being like an Olympic village and working guys and doing the right thing and working on the right things and developing you to become a pro. I actually really enjoyed you talking about it because there's not enough, I think, shared about the AIS and how good they were, developing kids and treating them like professionals. Like in the United States, you don't have that. You have high school, AAU, you hire a trainer, but it's really not anything that's regimented. You might be lucky enough to get a good high school coach early on or a good junior high coach early on, but you have nothing like that with an academy that's 5 days a week, 12 hours a day, working you like that and having the coaching and the background that you had at the AIS and they have internationally.
Yeah, and it's government funded too. That was a good thing about it. They're trying to take some funds away from it, and there's always a battle. But that was the beauty of it. It was obviously formed because we sucked at the Olympics in the 80s and 90s, and the government put that in place. But one of the fondest times of my life, to be honest with you, as hard as it was, and you thought it was hell at times. It was awesome looking back. And then once I got to college, it was like college was piss easy compared to, besides playing for Rick Majerus. Other than that, it was pretty easy schedule wise because the AIS, like I said, they strategically put you through the ringer Monday to Friday, knowing that once you become a professional, you're like, hey, this isn't as hard as I thought. So good question. Thanks for that. Next one is from Trent in Brisbane. Questions about crowds. Obviously, for you, they got bigger and bigger as you progressed, but was there ever a time you looked up and shit yourself? Felt like every set of eyes was trained on you, made you nervous, put you off, a bit like public speaking for most, with just that fear of stuffing up in front of a lot of people. Funnily enough, I just did a podcast about, which will come out soon, 2004 Athens Olympics. It'll be the My Journey episode 5. And I spoke about, we go to my first ever Olympics, we go to Athens, and guess who's in our group? Greece. Guess who our first game is? Greece.
Oh, great.
So we run out of this tunnel, man, and it was whistling, yelling, it was English swear words in broken English, it was abuse, it was everything and your mother. To the point where they were spitting on us, yelling so much. And I was 19, 20, and I'd played in college, had all the rivalry game. It was nothing compared to that shit. They were lighting flares in that place. They were singing songs. They were trying to move the basket stanchion. Just like, holy shit. Like, it was unbelievable. And that was still to this day, I've played in front of, it was only about 10 or 11,000 that fit in that arena in Athens. But I ran out and I was like, holy shit, this is some real, these people might kill us if we win. Like, they dead set might not let us out of the arena.
My first international experience, we went to, before I saw you in Greece, I think the year before, I went to the Reebok Euro Camp, the Euro Camp where all those young guys go to for the draft. And we went to an Italian playoff game, and Trae Young was playing. It was two really good Italian teams. And it was so bad that they had armed semi-automatic soldiers that went in the visiting section and went all the way down the row and all the way across. So they were basically surrounded. They had flares, M80s. They had, like, one guy was like me. He was like 400 fucking pounds. He had no shirt on. He had like stuff painted on, and all he did, I watched the guy the whole game. He didn't watch the game once. All he did was give the finger and the arm to the opposing crowd the whole fucking game. It was amazing that, like, it's nothing like the NBA. It's nothing like college. I don't care about what rivalry you have. There's nothing like international basketball, especially when there's a rivalry. And in the Olympics, in Greece, especially too, yeah, they're nuts, which is good. It's good, but it's also dangerous. They throw batteries. You had a guys lighting pennies on fire,
and then cigarette lighter,
throwing them at players.
Yeah. Like, guys,
unbelievable.
Hits you and burns your skin. It's almost like the near death appeals to them even more. Like, let's do something that's just on the borderline of killing someone, and it'll create more passion for us.
Yeah, I just wanted fucking pizza and fried fish. Give me a fucking break. I just wanted to get at halftime. We had to leave. We had to get fucking escorted out. It was crazy.
Yeah, and I've heard there's other story. I mean, Shane Heal tells a story. I believe it was former Australian player, played in Greece, could barely get paid on time, was number one, but he played for a team that was, I think it might have been him or someone else, but that was a borderline getting relegated. And basically the game they lost to get relegated, walks out to his car and all the fans are throwing eggs at all the players, the home players. Home fans are throwing eggs and And it's just a whole other world when you hear the stories from Europe. And some of them are hilarious, but then on the flip side, you wouldn't want to be in some of those locker rooms that, your life's basically on the line. But thanks for the question there. Next one comes from Tim from Muswell Brook in New South Wales. Did you have any other offers to go to any other colleges apart from the University of Utah? What was the University of Utah's biggest rival and how was the atmosphere when you played them? So first off, the biggest rival for the University of Utah was BYU. So that was the University of Utah was kind of the mixed school. It was kind of Mormons and a lot of out-of-towners, where BYU was the really strict Mormon school. So it just was a natural rivalry, and still is to this day, a lot of fights and just a real passionate game. But I didn't really get any other big offers. I got a bunch of small schools, University of Fordham in New York, a bunch of the Cal Tech, Cal Poly type schools, so nothing really big. And Utah got on me early and they were loyal to me early. And then my letter of intent expired that year, which I'll talk about in episode 4 of my journey. And I was supposed to go over and redshirt for half a season after Christmas, and the NCAA didn't let me over. So my letter of intent expired, and then I had a bunch of the bandwagon schools call, Oregon, Gonzaga, all these big schools started to call and say, hey, you're technically a free college agent, as it would be. Would you want to come to our school? And I basically flipped them all a bird and said, where were you pricks from the start? So I stayed with the University of Utah, and it all worked out well. What about you? Where'd you go to school, Pro?
Suffolk University in Boston, Division III school.
Yep.
So that's where I went. Yeah, I had no offers like you.
Were you the hockey goalie or something?
No, I was actually the goal. They put me in. Actually, I could have been a goalie. I would have fit the whole fucking net up. You wouldn't have scored one goal on it.
Yeah, you would have been good.
Yeah, no doubt. Suffolk University, brother.
Beautiful. All right, next question. Love the podcast, love your work, all that fun stuff. Basketball question, a little off the cusp, but I'm intrigued to know what your thoughts were around the Australia versus New Zealand rivalry in basketball and games that you've played in. How does the intensity compare to, say, NBA basketball? And then how do I see the New Zealand Breakers as a franchise? Do I agree they should be in the NBL and the Australian League? And how do other people see things? I think the New Zealand Breakers have been a great story, very, very successful, very, very professionally ran, obviously new ownership now, and they're trying to do all the right things, and they haven't had a whole lot of success the last couple of years, but I feel like they're well supported. The crowds there were always good, 4,000 or 5,000 people. So I think they're doing a good job, and I like having them in the NBL. If that lasts long term, who knows? I know there's always a bit of an issue with them, having a positive bank balance at the end of a season, just because they obviously need to travel a whole lot more, and they've got a whole lot more to deal with. Now, Australia versus New Zealand, Pro, that's kind of our USA Russia of the 70s, 80s rivalry. Whenever we play in, whether it's basketball, soccer, or who can walk their dog down the street faster, it's a huge rivalry. And I played in some fantastic games. We when I started my national team career, New Zealand were really, really good. They had a bunch of guys that were strong, physical, and they ran similar to a Princeton type offense where it was really methodical, but they'd just wait for someone in one possession to make a mistake, and they'd punish you with an open three or a layup. And we played there many times, and it was fun. It was physical. There was punches thrown in a few of the games, and I don't know if you remember, Pro, but they do the haka before the game.
Yeah, I've seen that.
We used to walk up to the half court line out of respect and to show we're not intimidated, and lock arms kind of along the half court line as they did it. And my very first game for Australia was against New Zealand, and I guess they were going to welcome the rookie, the 19, 20-year-old, and a guy ended up finishing his haka nose to nose with me. So I talk about it.
I think I've seen that actually.
Yeah, I talk about it in the latest in episode 5 of my journey, and they probably singled me out beforehand, like, let's mess with this young kid a bit and try to rattle him. And I remember the last probably 30 seconds of him doing the haka and doing the verses was his spit was literally hitting my face. So I'm like starting to get mad, like I'm gonna punch this guy in the face if he doesn't get out of my face. And then when it finished, he was nose to nose. We're touching noses. And then the whole crowd, we're in New Zealand, the whole crowd stands up and starts yelling. And I'm like, fuck you, I'm not moving. And he was the same. So then his team had to come and grab him. My team had to come grab me, pull me to the bench. And then we had to drive our first play for opening tips. So I still remember it was definitely an intense rivalry. What's your end of intense rivalries?
Well, I heard he was actually related to that swimmer that your boy knocked out at the AIS. Remember that story you did in your last fall?
Yeah,
he
maybe.
said, I'll get you fucking back. Yeah. But it's funny, like college used to have a lot of rivalries. They probably do still, obviously, a lot of good ones. The NBA used to be, Lakers, Celtics, Celtics, Sixers. There's a lot of rivalries. San Antonio, Dallas for a while. But internationally, it's the best rivalries I've ever seen. Panathinaikos, Olympiacos, and in the Greek league, Real Madrid and Barcelona in Spain. I like the international rivalries, to be honest with you, a little bit better than in college, because it seems like in America, for the most part, players sort of like they don't really go at each other like that. Where in international, it's they've been dealing with these rivalries for 20 years. And they've seen it, and they grew up, and they hate the other team. It just seems like everybody's sort of into it a lot more than it is in America. So I enjoy the international rivalries a lot better sometimes, than the college and the pro one and the NBA ones.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's obviously a lot of it has to do with history, right? Hundreds of years ago, and different towns with almost different kind of ideologies or religions, and it all kind of festered into kind of sporting clubs down the track. But thanks for your question. That was Simon from Launceston in Tasmania. Last one, couple of questions. Does Andrew still have an ownership interest in the Sydney Kings? And the quality of the league has grown by leaps and bounds over the years, but it seems to me as a one-eyed supporter that the quality of refereeing has not. Do you agree? And what are your thoughts? So first off, on the ownership thing, working through it right now. The issue I've got from the big dogs in the NBL is if I stay on as an owner, join the ownership group of the Sydney Kings, I will be somewhat muzzled as to what I can do and say. And as you know, Pro, that's not me. So
sold.
Yeah. So
hey, I can give you $20 just to get you fucking talking again. That's my first offer. Just so you know, it's on the table.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Eddie, we're working through it, but it's not looking likely. I don't like the likelihood of being muzzled by anybody. So I don't think it's going to happen. But if it does, we'll let you know. And the second question around the refereeing. Look, I think the referees in any league they're hard done by at times. They're human beings. They make mistakes. And this is coming from me, a guy who's notoriously got into it with referees over the years. And that's just a part of the passion and the fire. And when you're in that moment, you're frustrated. But you have to understand they're human and they make mistakes. The issue I have with the NBL and their referees is I think there's only 2 or 3 referees that are full-time referees. So what does that mean? That means the resources, the money, the referee doesn't have an incentive to go home and study the mistakes he made on tape, or to watch, certain habits of certain players that are getting away with things. They don't have that time invested because they're not being compensated. So the 2 or 3 refs that are full-time obviously do. But if you're going to be a professional league, you need to also treat the referees as such. So I don't entirely blame the level of refereeing solely on the referees. I think to take that step forward, we need the referees to have a full-time paycheck. What do you think, Pro?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that, look, like you said, they are humans and they make mistakes. But if you're in a professional league and you're not full time, in America, like NBA refs are full time and they get paid full time, and that's all they do. Where in college sometimes, and even football, for years they weren't, and I still think they're not full time. They just get paid by the week. So it's really hard to really invest in your craft to becoming a better referee if that's not your full-time employment. So I think, yeah, for sure they have to do that. And look, they're going to make mistakes. And look, there's a couple hundred possessions that go in an NBA game. I don't know about the NBL and whatnot, but there's plenty of time to make mistakes. They're just human. But I think if you really want to get better referees, you got to develop them, hold them accountable, but also give them a full-time salary and wage where they don't have to worry about another form of employment. That's 100% 24/7 what they're invested in as far as getting better at it.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. You just got to, and the unfortunate reality for the NBL is it's not a league that has a lot of money, so they got to kind of budget. But at the same time, if you want to hold that professional mantra and be that league that's now essentially getting close to being the 2, 3, 4, league in the world, you got to lift that side of things. So we'll move on to story time with Bogues and Pro. These are obviously fun, lighthearted. I've kept it to the role player theme, so I'm going to start off. You've got a few good ones as well, I believe, but my one is around the role player kind of agenda we were talking about earlier. I had a teammate named Jeremy Tyler. Now, this is a kid that was very, very good in high school. He took some bad family advice at one point and dropped out of high school in, I think, 11th grade. went over and played in maybe, I think, Israel first and then Japan, and didn't work out and kind of bounced around. And the Warriors ended up drafting him second round. I mean, he was a pretty good prospect, long, athletic. And he was a prime example of a very talented kid that was told he was the best thing ever since he was 10, 11 years old, but didn't really have anyone giving him good direction. And I remember the story goes like this. Look, he had a lot of guys trying to help him. He was a bit of a hothead. He didn't really understand why he wasn't playing. He looked at us upon like, hey, I'm better than that guy. I should be playing. Well, it's not as simple as that. We have Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. You need to fill a role. We're not going to give you 20 post touches a game. And he was a 4-5 man. We're playing against Miami when LeBron was there. I was sitting on the bench with him. And this kid, keep in mind, has barely played a minute all year. Doesn't play much. He's been up and down to the G League. Hasn't played well down there. He's trying to find himself essentially before he gets shipped off to Asia or Europe, and he's losing time. He looks at me and he goes, LeBron's on the team. LeBron was averaging somewhere in the 20s, 8 and 8 at the time or something like that. And I'm making a big deal how he was close to being, one of the first players to average a triple-double back then. This was before the Russell Westbrook kind of surge. And he looks at me and goes, hey, man, like, if I got the opportunity, I could average more than him, and pointing to LeBron. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, if coach, wasn't hating and gave me the same minutes that he was getting, I could average a triple-double in this league. And I'm like, are you talking about LeBron? And he's like, yeah, I could put up better numbers than him if I got 40 minutes a game. And I'm like, I looked at him, I said, Jeremy, man, maybe set the fucking bar a little lower and just try to start with a double-double first, which is hard enough in itself. The triple-double thing, and I felt bad for him to an extent, because it was like there was a little bit of delusion where he really thought that. And I'm like, man, that's the best player in the world. That's LeBron James. Like, what he's doing to even average 5, 5, and 5 isn't that easy, as silly as it sounds. He's averaging, historic numbers, and it just goes back to what you said about just didn't understand that if he just played a role of, hey, I'm gonna light up Steph Curry's man on a screen every possession and get him some open shots, he'd still be in the league, but he just couldn't get that around him.
He's playing a role right now. Unfortunately, it's in Okinawa, Japan, but he's playing a role.
Yeah. And look, we try to help the kid. I try to help him. We try to help him, but it just, you can only help so much. And when you're beaten on a brick wall at times, you kind of give up, which is the unfortunate reality of it. But that's my story.
Yeah. Well, my story comes, there's a couple we talked about, but I'm going to go with the role player story. So, sort of the same deal. There was a guy, a point guard out of New York, All-American. His name was Omar Cook. This is probably like 2001, 2002. And he was an All-American out of St. John, All-American high school, played at St. John's, came out early, and was a second-round pick. He got traded like twice on draft day. He played for the Denver Nuggets, and then played for the got released, played for the Dallas Mavericks, and then got released again. I wasn't officially working for the Celtics, but I would do some odd jobs for him, like work players out or whatnot. So at the end of like the 03 season, I believe, or the 02 season, they made the Eastern Conference Finals. They signed Omar at the last day of the season to get his rights. They gave him like $75,000 guaranteed, and they wanted to work him out over the summer. And then, to evaluate him the next year, maybe back up, be a backup point guard and see where they go. Because he was such a talented kid coming up, but he couldn't shoot. And he just had a million people blowing him up because he was the best point guard in the United States. So they say, hey, Mike, the coaching staff doesn't want anything to do with him right now. They don't want him to come to practice. They don't want him around the team. We want you to come work him out when the team leaves. Once the team leaves from practice, a couple hours later, you guys can come and work out. So I'm working out, just getting to know him. And as you know, I'm a little bit of a jokester. I mean, once in a while, and I'll throw some at you. Well, after the workout, we come to talk, and I lose about 38 pounds of workout. Because it only takes one up and back for me to lose 38 pounds. And the second is he wasn't the greatest shooter in the world, so I sort of had to rebound his shots. But at the end of the workout, we're in the locker room, and then we're just talking, and he goes, Mike, my agent's going to give me the max. I'm going to get the max next year. I said, Omar, first of all, I hope you're talking about a new meal, Burger King meal is called the max, and you can get extra fries and a drink with that. Second thing is, look, you've been on 4 fucking teams. There's nobody here. They've asked 48 guys to work you out. I'm the 49th. All right. Like, it's either me or the homeless guy that was asking for change out front, and it was neck and neck. And then, I sort of made it by a hair. I said, where do you think you're making the max? And it was unfortunate because the kid was a good kid. But the problem is, again, young kids, Jeremy Tyler, same thing. They don't understand. And he ended up getting cut by the Celtics in Summer League. He ended up playing. He didn't get cut in Summer League. Yeah, actually he did. And then he played like a couple of teams and then he faded out. Played overseas actually for a while, still playing in Spain, and actually rebounded to be a pretty good, productive player in Spain. But the problem with these stories, Bogues, a friend of mine told me this, and I'll tell you the Omar Cook, he says they go through 5 stages, players do, and all people do, but players especially. Who's Omar Cook? Keep an eye on Omar Cook. Get me Omar Cook. Get me an Omar Cook type, and who's Omar Cook? They get forgotten very quickly. It's like, asking somebody who was prom queen in high school 5 years ago. Nobody remembers. And you only have a certain amount of time to be relevant and then to get you back on, to get you into your journey in basketball, if you're good enough. And these players, they just don't understand. And Omar was a good kid, don't get me wrong. But like, if he understood that, hey, I should have stayed in school, I needed to learn how to shoot, let me get more good big games under my belt, and let me get better as a player, and then I could probably become a productive player, maybe even a starter in the NBA. But like a guy who got cut 3 times, getting worked out by a mutant like me, coaching staff didn't want him around that year, and to say that he's going to get the max the next year is, it's preposterous. And that's just sort of what we're dealing with players. And, again, I'm glad he sort of made it. He's been playing overseas for 10, 12 years, and he's made it. And that's great. But 99% of players like him would have definitely phased out in 2 or 3 years and never played again.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is the family and the friends and the agent and the group around him that just are just, you kind of need some people to pump you up a little bit. Don't get me wrong. Like the NBA, I was heavily against pumping myself up and doing all my personal promotion kind of when I was in the NBA. But the way I had a teammate word it to me and said, look, if you're not your biggest fan, who is? And that made sense a little bit because you gotta be your biggest fan essentially, which is kind of the contradictory to the Australian mindset. We're kind of the opposite. As soon as you do that, Australians equate you as an American and you're arrogant, you're selfish. So it's a fine line. But I think a lot of the times these people are just they know what they're saying is not the truth, and they know what they're saying is basically based on hoping an Omar Cook makes it so I can get some of the change, some of that money that comes flowing in. So I need to tell this kid, do everything you can to be the best so I can get that free car or that free house. And it's the unfortunate reality. And for 99% of athletes, pro athletes, at least trying to make the NBA, it doesn't work out well. And then they end up going over to a small country somewhere, play okay basketball, but then have kind of a midlife or a breakdown or hate basketball. And it's the unfortunate reality of our business, right?
Yeah, it is. And look, it's not for everybody, and it's a talent league, but you need to be mentally strong. You need to be your best fan, like you said. You need to be confident in what you do, because confidence, especially trying to come in from the outside, not a top 3 pick, not a lottery pick, but like when you're a 2nd round pick, undrafted, playing overseas to try to get better, you need confidence in yourself, and you need to, this is going to be a long journey. Ryan Brokoff is another. It was a great example of somebody who keeps grinding it out. Played overseas, played in college, played overseas, made the NBA, trying to get back to the NBA. But he figured it out. Like anybody who's telling him he's too good for this, too good for that, he obviously doesn't listen. He knows what needs to be done. He knows that what he can and can't do on the floor. And I think that's the most important thing as a player, knowing what you can't do and the one thing that you can do to get on the floor. And I think that if they have that mindset, you're better off. But if you start listening to these people who are obviously just trying to get in your pockets, telling you you're the best ever, you're the best, they're all hating on you, you're this, you're that, and you start listening to them and you stop doing the work and you stop preparing and you stop being invested in your craft, you're fucked. You got no chance.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, that wraps it up, man. A big one. Thanks for your time again, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us, all the listeners out there. Rogue Bogues on all the social media platforms. Hoop Consultants, right, bro? That's your channel. If they want to get some more basketball.
Yeah. I got fucked. I got purged by 8 viewers last night. So hopefully my 27 people that still follow me are still tuned in.
27. You've checked your account. You got 9,000. No, you got 15,000 followers on Twitter, man. Stop trying to be humble.
Yeah, but only 72 of them have a pulse. Thank God for Indonesia and being able to buy those guys.
Or all the people that work at McDonald's.
Oh, fuck, yeah.
Around the
over
world.
2 billion. Hey, over 2 billion. First of all, another rivalry, what you forgot from the Q&A that I really enjoyed was Burger King versus McDonald's. Second of all, if I ever stop... yeah, if I ever stop going to McDonald's, that sign from 2 billion served goes to 1 billion served. So, thank God I'm still on the payroll.
All right, bro. Thanks. We'll see you next week.
Anytime, brother.